To start with, are there any bill introductions today? Anybody have a bill introduction? Okay, seeing none. The only item on our agenda today is a presentation on the KU Innovation Campus. I had the pleasure of visiting there a few weeks back. It's a pretty incredible thing what they're doing, and they're spurring new small businesses that could grow into some pretty big things. And so we'll start with that. I think Laverne Epp is here to discuss it with us, and Cindy is going to send out a slide deck, and this will be another reminder that anytime there is a presentation material, it needs to be here. It needs to be Cindy 24 hours in advance so she can put it all together. We'll make an exception this time. Thank you. You can turn on your microphone. There's a button there. Perfect. You're on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon to you and members of your committee. Thank you for the invitation and allowing us to present for a few minutes this afternoon the update on the KU Innovation Park. We appreciate your interest in the park, and also we appreciate your service to the state of Kansas. Thank you very much. Just a few words about the overview of the KU Innovation Park, and then my colleague Adam Courtney, who is the Chief Financial Officer of the KU Innovation Park, will talk with you a little bit about some of our future plans. My name is Laverne Epp. I am the Executive Chair and have served in that position with the KU Innovation Park for about 10 years. First, just a word about what the park is and where it is. The park is an economic development organization. It is located in the building that you see on the screen there on the west campus of the University of Kansas. It is a private enterprise, and its main purpose is really quite simple, and that is to create and recruit companies that produce jobs. And most of the jobs are in the science and technology sectors. And so as a corollary to the mission of the organization, we're also hoping to strengthen the resiliency and the diversity of the Kansas economy, and particularly in Northeast Kansas, with the kind of jobs that we have and that the companies in the park create. And so I will move now to the next slide and just tell you a minute, just give you a brief overview of the park organization. It's a very unique coalition among the Lawrence Chamber of Commerce, the University of Kansas, the City of Lawrence, and Douglas County. So you can see the convergence there of business, academics, the academic community, as well as government, local government. And this has worked fairly effectively for the last 10 to 12 years, and there are two reasons for that. One is that each of our stakeholders has an equal interest in the park as a private enterprise, and also because they are all committed to the interests of what our primary measurement of success is, and that is to create the kinds of jobs and produce the kinds of jobs for Kansans, both that can be used by some of our students at KU, as well as companies that we recruit into the state. And I'll move to the next slide then, please. Just a quick view of our metrics, and we measure our success in three different ways. We look at the number of companies that we recruit or that we create, the number of jobs that are produced by those companies, and then payroll. All indicators and fairly significant economic drivers. And you can see our 10-year history, how we have grown both companies, how we've grown both jobs and also payroll, and you can see the trajectory there. I'll give you a quick overview now of where we are today, and if you'd move to the next slide, please. In the system today, we have 62 companies and over 500 jobs, direct jobs that our companies have produced, and those jobs have generated payrolls in excess of $30 million a year. One of the things that we track in addition to these jobs is the year-over-year job growth of our companies in the park. Oh, let me just make a comment about the 62 companies that you see on the chart there. 70% of those companies are startups. So we work very closely with them, and in some sense, some would say we are an incubator, and we are to a certain extent. Sometimes we have an accelerator description, and we provide services to our companies as well. As we look at those jobs, we examine how those jobs grow year over year inside of our companies. And if you look at the next slide, please, look at this graph. The gold bar that you see at the top there is the year-over-year job or employment growth of the companies that are in the park over the last 5 years. And we compare that growth to what goes on in the city of Lawrence as well as across the state of Kansas. In 2021, you'll note that our jobs in our companies grew almost 30%, compared to little under 3% for both Lawrence and the state of Kansas. We think that's vital and important as we continue to try to grow that sector of the economy of science and technology, which is so important to our Kansas economy. I'm going to now defer to my colleague Adam Courtney, who is going to talk about the future of our plans and perhaps ways in which this committee might be able to be helpful.
Thank you, Laverne. Like you said, I'm Adam Courtney. I'm the CFO of the KU Innovation Park. Laverne's given you kind of the history of where we are, where we've been, and I'm going to talk about the future development of the KU Innovation Park. So next slide, please. KU Innovation Park is in the process of evolving our strategic plan. We have a 15-year outlook. We're calling it the 2037. It's a combination of 10 buildings on West Campus, like Laverne said, in Lawrence. The special thing about this location is it's adjacent to the university, and inside that circle, some of those light-colored buildings are the largest concentration of life science research in the state. So it's important to our companies to be close and have access to the university. So it's part of what drives the demand that we're showing. Currently, you can see the phase 1 and 2 building up in the top left. That's the building that you saw at the very beginning. And we are in the middle of construction of the phase 3 project, which is the adjacent building there. And then we'll build down around that corner, all of that on endowment land, which is private and separate from the university land. Next slide, please. So at the finish of those 15 years and 10 buildings, these are kind of the metrics we're looking at. The park will have 2,500 jobs, about $271 million in annual payroll. It consists of 10 buildings again and about 80,000 square feet of space. That'll cost about $400 million in capital investment and have an annual impact of about $1.01 billion. So pretty significant impact. Next slide, please. Like we said, phase 3 is under construction now. It's a 66,000 square foot building. It consists of both wet lab and dry lab space, specialized, and will support the growth of some of the companies, the startup companies that are growing and need that specialized space, a lot of which is not available in the region, and those companies would be at risk of moving somewhere else to get that space if we didn't provide it for them. It's about a $20 million building. We were able to leverage local funding and state funding of about $1 million to go out and get $7.8 million from the EDA, a federal grant, and the rest of it was capitalized privately. So we're about 85% pre-committed in that building, and it's not going to be open until late spring, early summer. We're looking at May, June to have a grand opening for that building. So you can see there's a lot of momentum there. We're expecting to be above 85% when we open, and so that creates another gap in having available space for these high-growth startup companies. Next slide. And so to capture that momentum and continue our mission of modernizing, diversifying, and making the regional and state economy more resilient, we're focused on our next two phases. We're calling this the Phase 4 and 5 plan. Within this picture, there's a Phase 6 as well, but it kind of just gives you a visual representation of where we're talking about. These buildings will be adjacent to Phase 1 and 2 and 3, and that proximity we found in research parks is really important. You want that density and the companies close together for that collaboration. And so Phase 4 is what we're calling the National Security Innovation Center. It will leverage the strengths of the university in some of the research areas that they have. The university has federal dollars that come in to support that research, and the National Security Innovation Center will contain companies that are doing cybersecurity, remote sensing, AI, machine learning, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and it'll be adjacent to the Kansas Applied Research Lab, which is currently in our building. And so that proximity is going to be really close for the commercialization aspects of that technology. And then Phase 5 is a bioscience innovation center, and it'll be focused on building out that more specialized wet lab space that's important for those life science companies, human health, animal health, biotechnology, medical device companies that need that specialized wet lab space that there's not the inventory for. So it's really important to continue to meet the needs of the companies that we have growing and the commercialization of the research at the university. So we are focused on those two phases. We put a proposal out and we submitted it. It's an $88 million proposal. About $60 million of that is for those two buildings. They're both 80,000 square foot buildings. And then the additional funding will go to support additional research in attracting federal dollars to the university and developing those technologies. Next slide, please.
Oh, there it is. I'm sorry. This thing goes back.
Oh, no worries. In addition to what the KU Innovation Park is focused on, which is the business and research commercialization aspects, the endowment is also focused on developing the West Campus, and this is a rendering or visualization. If you're familiar with Lawrence, that's Iowa and 23rd or Clinton Parkway there, and so this is what it would look like eventually when it's all built out. The endowment is focused on the residential, the retail, the restaurant, the amenity aspects, including things like daycare that are going to be attractors for the companies. And we believe that, the business and research that we're developing and the companies that are there, the employees that will work there, what we're doing will be attractive to what they're doing and vice versa. And so they're both key to building out the research park and the West Campus in Lawrence. And so the next slide is just another kind of look. We're trying to build this live, work, play type environment. We think that's important. The more modern or younger employees are looking for that, a place to live where they can walk to work. And so campus will provide that for them and be attractive to those companies and those employees. And so that's all we have for a formal presentation. We're willing to take questions if anybody has any.
Committee, are there any questions? Representative Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Earlier in your presentation, if we can go back, I don't know, the slides aren't numbered. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to find it. Third page. The middle column says park graduates. Are those companies who have outgrown your facility and then have moved off-site?
Yeah, and we don't have a specific program to graduate companies because a lot of them want to be close to the university, and so that proximity is important to them. But we do have a set of companies that have graduated. What we consider a successful graduation is a company who grows out of our space but stays in Kansas. So we don't count graduates that leave to go to Silicon Valley. That's not a success for us because our mission is to keep them here. And so those graduates are in the state and still creating jobs in Kansas.
As a follow-up, thank you for that. And you may not be able to answer this, and that's fine. Does this consortium of the four groups, do they take an ownership stake in any of these startups? And then is it structured based on where you end up locating? Like if you go to Silicon Valley, as you said, then you would maybe take a higher stake, or is that part of the plan?
Yeah, and a lot of accelerator programs do initially, if you're going to be part of an accelerator, take an interest. We do not. We do have a small interest in a couple of companies, but mostly because we're heavily involved in those in a management role or from creation. And so I think we have 3 maybe that we're invested in as of the 62, but it's not a practice that we take interest at the beginning of all these companies. And so very, very few of those, and it has to be a special situation.
Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is there a story behind your logo?
Our logo, we just had rebranded recently, and so I don't know if you can bring back up one of the slides, then we can look at that. We were the Bioscience and Technology Center before, and so we've just rebranded to the KU Innovation Park because not very many people understood who we were and what we were doing. And so the significance kind of the new logo is, if you look at it, it kind of resembles a Jayhawk in that it has an I there in the red section, but it also has a K and a U in it. But it also kind of looks like the West Campus that we're trying to develop, and that I really sits where we do in proximity for this building right here within West Campus. Does that make sense?
Well, logos never make complete sense because they are art, you know.
Right.
And so it's a matter of interpretation. But I kept looking at it thinking there was a story, and I did see the K, I saw the Jayhawk, and
Yeah.
but all in all, I like it. On a more serious note, are you familiar with the K-State campus in Salina centered on aviation development?
I am not familiar. We know K-State in terms of Manhattan and the Edge and what they're doing there, but not
I was
the
just
Salina
curious
campus.
whether or not it was the model there was similar to what you all have.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the Salina campus.
Yeah, we were, those of us on the redistricting tour got to hold one of our hearings at that facility. I didn't know it existed until we landed there, but from the looks of it, it looks a lot like this model. But
Yeah,
thank you.
And we would love to host you as well if you take the opportunity.
Yeah, only the chairman gets to do that.
Well, thank you for your question, and I'm going to jump in here just because I'm older than Adam and have been around a whole lot longer with the Innovation Park. The early inspiration for the Innovation Park came actually from the communications that we had with the University of, or Kansas State University. In fact, the legislation which went into effect to allow us to be tax exempt was patterned after K-State's NISTAC. And Kent Glasscock at K-State was very helpful in helping us to kind of create that. So we have a really strong working relationship with K-State to kind of collaborate from time to time on companies that kind of are in the animal health industry particularly that we work with. And and we do have some familiarity with the work that they do in Salina, but mostly related to the Edge at K-State. But thank you for the question.
Representative Hoffman. Representative Curtis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is about the wet lab. So is that proposed or is that up and running? And then will that be the only wet lab in the Lawrence area? I know how important that is to medical research.
Yeah, our current facility has got about 25% wet lab in it, which is really important for those small startup companies. The new building, we're projecting about 20 to 25% in. We're about 35% now just because of the demand, and so we've converted some office space. I think, as everybody knows, wet lab is really expensive to build. We're looking at, $450 to $700 a square foot, depending on how specialized it is. So it's really important to them. And then in terms of inventory in Lawrence itself, there just isn't any. We run an overflow building in West Campus, or in West Lawrence at Wakarusa and Bob Billings, and it has some wet lab space in it, but it's really old and needs to be updated, but it's still expensive to do. And so without the additional inventory, there wouldn't be places for these companies to go.
Representative Dodson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just one quick question. On the 400 million of direct investment, I assume that's linked to the phase build-out that you have. Can you give us some idea of how that flows in? Is it kind of linear? And then are you going to need some help on developing this concept?
Yeah, and so far we've had help. The original phase one was developed with the support of the KBA, and so we leveraged KBA funding with stakeholder support. And so the KBA did a piece, and then the city and the county and the university supported the rest of it. Phase two, we asked for stakeholder support again, and then we leveraged our relationship with the endowment to get some financial loan basically from them. And then this last phase, we took that local funding and support and went out and raised the EDA funding. If we could get funding for the entire phase 4 and 5 projects, that would make the park sustainable and give us the capital base and the operational cash flow to support the additional development, and we could support that through the cash flows and the assets. And so if we could get the $88 million, we would need to come back for more, but we would be investing the additional money to get to that 400 million, and that's based on what we think it's going to cost to build out those 10 buildings.
Thanks very much.
Representative Highland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the information presentation. Years ago, I worked with an innovation group off of Wakarusa. Is this kind of an outgrowth from that beginning?
Yeah, I'm assuming that might be the Lawrence Regional Technology Center or the Lawrence Douglas County Bioscience Authority were two of the former predecessor entities. They were merged together to create the Bioscience and Technology Business Center back in 2010. And so there was some other iterations of what we're doing that had been combined and now is the KU Innovation Park.
Do you still own buildings out in that location?
We do not. The only building that we own is on West Campus there. And then we manage the incubator at the Med Center as well. And then we have an overflow building that's owned by the city and the county, but we manage it. So we only own one building at this point, and then phase 3, which is the new building that's coming online.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
How close are you on phase 3 completion? Last time I was there, it looked like, you were pretty well into it.
Yeah, and we're closed in, thankfully, for the winter, and we're looking at a grand opening in late May or early June. We're going to try to deliver space at the beginning of May to the majority of the tenants. We're still recruiting new tenants in and finishing design on some of the other tenant space. We haven't seen a whole lot of impact from supply chain, thankfully. We started this project at a time, I think, that was good, and all the subcontractors were able to secure those supplies. And so we still think we're going to deliver on time, although there are a few lead time items like insulation that we've had to pivot on, but we've had good luck so far.
Are these mostly KU students that are starting businesses, or can anyone go there and you can help just anyone start a new business?
We're open to anybody. It's primarily researchers who have the technology. It's a lot of it's university IP that gets commercialized, and so we try to identify who those are, or they come to us and we help them set up the companies. It's not always the researcher that joins the company. It might be a postdoc or a graduate student that is familiar with the research that actually runs the company. We do have students. We have, I think we're over 50 interns, and so we do have a good selection of interns coming over to work in those jobs. And really, one of our goals is to retain the talent that the university is creating and provide jobs for them so they stay in the state. We know we have a large brain drain of graduate students that leave the state, and so we're trying to shore that up a little bit and provide them a good place that they can land after they graduate.
So last time I talked to you guys, I was kind of going around down the road of tracking the revenue stream that this creates for the state of Kansas, so we can look at that and try to figure out a way to capture that into an economic development fund and then return some money to you guys to help you build out the other facilities. Have you Have you gone there at all?
In terms of tracking, is that what your question is? I'm sorry.
Right.
We don't track what the return is. We don't ask for financials of the companies. Taxes would be one way to do that. We don't require them to give that, and a lot of times we try to make sure that we're not sharing that information or requesting it. So we don't have the information of what the actual return is in income tax, but we could certainly try to measure that. It would be some modeling, which would include some estimating.
Okay, that would be beneficial because it make helping you a lot easier.
Right.
Can you mention some of the companies that you've worked with, some of your success stories?
Yeah, I mean, Einstein is a engineering company that does remote sensing. They started as two founders, basically, 5 years ago. They've grown to 30 to 35 jobs now. They're going to be the most recent graduate, and so they're going to go find space in the Lawrence community for those people so they can expand. They have great technology. Most recently, they worked with a company to develop a launch monitor for golf, and Tiger Woods is a sponsor of that. And so some good technology. We have a vaccine company we were able to recruit the founder of from Minnesota. And he created an adjuvant that went into a vaccine from India and has been in 190 million people so far. So really, those are a couple of the more recent success stories that I could share with you.
Any further questions?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
I'd like to add just one other example of companies that we work with or that we help create. This one is a little bit unusual in that it's a software company, but the name of the company is Foster Care Technologies. It is a unique company that has software that matches foster kids with foster parents or foster homes. It was the creation of private industry. The technology was creation of private industry who came to us about 7 or 8 years ago and asked if we could help commercialize this new technology built around the software. All the underlying validation of the research, the effectiveness of the placements of the children using this technology was done at the School of Social Welfare at KU. So it's a technology company, but is different than bioscience and different than engineering, but very unique. The company today is in 7 different major states, and is expanding its operations and sharing that technology with states and large agencies in counties that have high volume of foster care placement. And the efficacy of the technology is that if you use the placement model, it improves placement dramatically, which reduces the number of placements that children have to make, obviously reduces the cost on the placement agency, including the state or the county. So that's just another example of the kinds of companies with which we get to work, which makes our job rewarding and, frankly, a great deal of fun.
Is the state of Kansas using that software, or have you approached them about it?
The state of Kansas is not using the software. The company made a proposal to the state of Kansas a couple of years ago. Kansas decided to select a different provider. The company is hoping to revisit the state of Kansas. We've had some conversations with the governor about that and hoping to kind of take another look at it.
I know that's a pretty big need we have around here. So, Representative Curtis, did you have something?
Well, I actually heard a story about that, and when I heard that, I thought it was maybe a Code for America initiative, because that kind of goes along with what they do with civic tech. So that's interesting. I was glad to hear that connection.
All right, well, seeing no further questions, thanks so much for coming in committee. Archive this, because one of the things that we're hoping to get to this year is to look at the EDIF funds and how they should be used. And this is the kind of thing we need to do with EDIF funds. That's what statute says we need to do with them anyway. So keep that in the back of your head. with that, we're adjourned, and I guess we'll see you guys at 4:30 on the floor.
Thank you very much. And all of you are welcome to visit. Mr. Chairman, you're welcome to return. Thank you so much.